Today I will be introducing the Quiltworx Stella Maris Mixer series. This 4-round 68-inch layout was originally designed for Quiltworx University in Williamsburg, Virginia, scheduled in April 2020 and canceled due to the COVID-19 travel and social distancing restrictions. This event is rescheduled for March 2021. The quilt behind me is an example of the 4-round 68-inch Stella Maris Mixer, which Quiltworx will be publishing in August 2020, called Crimson Poppy. I made this quilt using Kaffe Classics, also to be released in August 2020. For today's demos, I will be making the same block series using the Tula Pinks True Colors collection. Make sure to check out the Free Spirit Inspired by Facebook live event on August 27th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for more information on this project. Let's get started with the 4-round 68-inch introduction booklet. So preparing to do our 4-round Stella Maris Mixer series, I'm going to give you a couple tips and tricks that I use in class with my students to make it easier for you to prepare to make this quilt. You're going to receive several packages that look like this with papers and instruction sheets. One of the first things you want to do is on the back of each instruction booklet, you'll find an inventory list. This inventory list for round 4 mixer borders, these are the F units. We have an inventory list for NP 779, 4 pages, NP 780, 4 pages, TP 569, 1 page, and so on. This is where you want to find those. I'm going to open these. Now this is an especially large package. You don't usually get quite this many papers, but I want to go through so you can confirm and make sure you have all of your papers in this pattern. So NP 779, in this corner, you'll see NP 779. And it tells us we need 4 of these. I can go through 1, 2, 3, and 4. NP 780, also 4 pages. 1, 2, 3, and 4. TP 569, 1. TP 570, 1. 571, 1. 572, 1. So we know we have everything. Quiltworx is very careful. They actually measure and weigh each pattern to really prevent you having any, missing papers. If you are missing any, contact your certified instructor if you're taking a class, or Quiltworx, and they can help you get a hold of what you need. Also, if you do have mistakes and errors, we can generally get you an extra sheet at cost, plus shipping, and get those. So don't ever be too afraid of making a mistake and cutting something incorrectly. It happens, and Quiltworx is pretty prepared for that. Okay, the next step I want to do is show you how to prepare your pattern and how to make it easier for you to go through this. Like I said, you're going to receive in this pattern J, K, L, M, and F, so 5, I believe 5 different units. So you'll receive 5 different blocks, 5 different booklets. So to organize that, I like you to put them in a binder. Now, I've printed my cover sheet off of Quiltster. If you actually have a pattern with a cover sheet, you can put that in the front of your binder, and that really helps you know what you're working on. So getting a good quality binder and good quality cover protector sheets will really help you keep this organized. When you receive that booklet, they come in the larger sheets. So all I do is open that to the center page, Occasionally they're a little bit thicker and there may be a staple or two in here. Make sure you remove those staples so you don't ruin that blade. I'm going to find that fold and I'm just going to use my ruler and my rotary cutter. Now I have 4 pages that I can easily place into my binder sheets. This is so helpful in class when you're paging through things. Also in classes, we often have many students and many patterns floating around, and it's very easy to get them shuffled and misplaced. So setting that binder up that way is going to really make your life a lot easier. And then we can put those in order on how we're going to use those throughout class. And I'll go into that a little bit more. I'm going to finish setting this up, and then we're going to talk more about the introduction booklet and some supply list. Okay, so I've set up some of the supplies, most of the supplies that we're going to be using for most of our Quiltworx paper piecing patterns. And these are what I'm going to be using today. We have a general supply list, which you're going to find in your introduction packet. The general supplies: steam iron, ironing board, large size cutting board, 6 by 24 inch ruler. I like to have several different sizes of rulers. Small scissors, good quality rotary cutter with a new blade, seam ripper, sewing machine with a 1/4 inch pressing foot. There's some particular items that we use with paper piecing. Some of those, the purple thing, that's great for curved piecing, tearing papers, and some uses with applique also. We have to have an add a 1/4 ruler, and with that you will need a folding template. I have a label on mine with some basic directions. We'll also be using several different glues. We have a fabric glue stick that we use to apply the first piece of paper, the first piece of section 1 to the paper. Everything else gets sewn down, so we don't need to use that any other time. We have a glue pen, which is fabric to fabric. So when we're doing curved piecing and different techniques, sometimes when we've got some long pieces underneath the paper, we like to glue those down. So this is fabric to fabric. And these are some refills, which I highly recommend, especially if you're making a large quilt, to have several of these refills. We've also recently started using a repositionable glue stick. This is a Scotch 3M product. There are several repositionable glue stick products out there. I've tried all of them. None of them, except for the 3M that I found, actually say fabric use on the packaging. This does. Many of the school repositionable series are a little greasy. They don't stick well and they leave a residue. So make sure you use that 3M restickable or repositionable glue stick. It comes in several different sizes. You can find that at your office product store, you can find them online, and you can find them at your local craft store, and more of the quilt shops are starting to carry them also. We're definitely going to need a good quality seam ripper. We have Quiltworx special curved diamond cutting and trimming ruler. That will help us with our curved trimming. We have a good pair of small scissors. We actually really like the curved for some of the techniques that we use. We've got flower pins. We've got a good quality cotton thread. You want to have a good quality and to the finer side. You don't want to get too thick. it can get a little bit bulky with your paper piecing. Some things that I recommend to bring to class is some Scotch tape. If we cut or tear something or have to take something out, we can easily tape that paper back together without having to find a new piece. So if you accidentally cut something, easy fix with this. We use binder clips and paper clips, and also you want to have a good supply of Ziploc bags, large size gallon Ziploc bags. You may choose to, and I'll demonstrate this later, use some printing labels, which I've printed. You definitely don't have to do that, but for clarity, it really helps with the organization, and it's going to help you guys see today my bags and how I have them labeled. Another thing we've recently started using is the Acorn precision piecing products. This is an easy press pen. When we're pressing open on some of our curved piecing and we're having a little bit of difficulty and we can't use a heavy steam iron because of the paper on the back, this product we can use right on that seam line, and we'll demo that today, and then press it. Just works beautifully. And it's really important when we're pressing through the paper piecing process, as with any quilting process, to get those seams opened and pressed properly so that when we remove the papers, our block size doesn't change. Good quality rotary cutter, and we also recommend a Microtex size 70 sewing machine needle. They stay sharper, and they don't create as big of holes when we're sewing through paper. So a good quality size 70 needle will help immensely through your paper piecing journey. Before we go any further, I want to make sure that you all note on the first page of our Mixer General Information Booklet, there's on the bottom of the first hand column, there's a corrections section. In that section, it will tell you where to refer to corrections. The first thing you want to know is when your print date was of the pattern that you're actually using. On the back, you'll see print date 3/22/20. Okay? So before you get started with purchasing fabric, cutting fabric, or even your papers, you want to go on to Quiltworx website, and if you know how to use a UR code, you can use that with your phone, line your camera up, it'll take you directly to the corrections page. And that's going to list any corrections, and they refer to a date, so you'll know any corrections past the date of your purchase date that may apply to you. Then they have printout pages that will clearly list any corrections or updates that need to be made. And that's very important to do because it's very easy to make a minor mistake in these that might just be confusing, and it might be very important when it comes to yardage. So make sure you do that. Okay, so a few things we want to talk about are the different things that are going to come on your newsprint in your pattern. We have several different types of foundation units, template cutout sheets, and then each one has different lines. So we're going to go over what each one of those means. In the series, the Mixer series, that group it's all going to go together. So each sheet could have a combination of different things. If you look at this NP 780, we have unit F1L, unit F2L, we have unit F4L, unit F3L, unit F5L. So those are all different units. These are actually the sewing foundation papers. Now in here, we actually have a template layout sheet for cutting. On every one of these blocks, you're going to see units F3R, F4R, and F5R, template layout sheet number 6. So as we go through our directions, it's going to tell you to put this template sheet in this bag, but we just want to make sure you understand template layout sheet is something we're going to stack on top of our fabric, and then cut line 1, 2, 3, 4, making sure we do that in order. And we're going to go through that process in a little bit, but we just want you to realize what is going to be, that these all are different things. If it says unit, that's something you're going to be sewing on. If it says template layout sheet, that's something you're going to be stacking on top of your fabric and cutting with. There's also T templates. Now our T templates stand for traditional template, which is very similar to your plexiglass templates that we're used to buying for different patterns and different shapes. But what Quiltworx has done is they've printed that T template on the paper for you. So TP 572 actually has several different things on it. We have T template F3R. Now your T templates are something, we'll demo this, but we're going to cut that out. We're going to leave, about 1/4 of an inch of paper around that. We're going to use our repositionable glue, and we always have to pay attention to stack right sides up, use our repositionable glue, and we'll cut that out precision. Anytime we see T template for traditional template, that is precision cutting. We have a cutout template for F5L1. And then here's kind of a combination. This dashed line, this means we want to keep these 3 pieces together, okay? Because what they've done with the pattern is we're going to cut this out on this dashed line, and we're going to stack that onto a 9-inch piece of fabric, and we're going to cut all of this out at the same time. What this is doing is keeping the grain line the same direction. So don't go in and cut these out separately anytime you see this dashed line. All right? That dashed line will be a cue to not cut these out. You're just going to make more work for yourself if you do. So we're back to NP 779. We have all these different units. We have several pages of these, and to save time, I'm going to show you a technique, several techniques, to stack these and be able to cut these out at the same time. Now, with the ever-growing popularity of our light boxes, if I can get it to turn on, there we go, and I'm going to turn it on to high. What we're using today is Caterpillar. This is a nice big size. They also come with a cutting mat that you can put on top of there and use that so you can slip that in and out. Judy really loves these, loves this brand. I am too, I'm loving it. We're going to show you a nice technique, and there are several different ways. I'll show you a couple different ways. Don't feel you have to have one of these, but many of us already do, so let's use that. When I turn that light on, you can see my 2 different lines here. Okay, so with this light box, I can line those up and make sure I have everything lined up perfectly. So when I go in and cut multiple sheets, I'm comfortable knowing I can cut really close, which is really important. We always want to make sure we cut about 1/8 of an inch around there. When you get a lot of these in close quarters, it's a little harder to cut, so the light box trick is really handy. Another trick that we've seen Judy starting to do is use our repositionable glue and not inside the unit, but anywhere we're going to cut away, instead of using a pin to at least get that secured, I can go in and use my repositionable glue in these blank spaces and just do a little extra securing. Again, I can see that I've got that lined up perfectly. Put a little glue, line that up, and those are lined up and ready to cut. Now, one thing I might do just to make sure that doesn't slip on me is go in and put one pin in each unit just to make sure when I do cut those that those don't shift and fall apart on me. So I'll put a couple pins there. Now I'm going to move this to the side. I'm going to turn off my light box. And I'm going to grab my NP 780s. I believe I have 4 of those. We'll just deal with 3 right now. Okay, so without the use of a light box, we can stack these and pin these and still cut these out at the same time. So what we would do, the first thing you want to confirm is that you have all of these in the right direction. Now be careful, don't just refer to this NP 780. If I turned to this page, that NP 780 would look the same, and I'd cut those and I'd be cutting through my bottom pages. So you always want to refer to the corner numbers here. Corner number 1, 1, 1. I do have 4 pages here and 1. Okay, so make sure those are all lined up before you start. And I'm going to take one of my flower pins and I'm going to find a point on this page, and I'm just going to use the corner of that unit F4L, and I'm going to put it through my pin through the exact same position in these. If any of you have made a stack and whack, this is how you did that. You lined up those fabrics by putting that pin through. I'm going to get that lined up. I'm going to pinch that really good, and I'll adjust that pin after I get a few more secured in here. I'm going to do the same thing with this corner. Now you can see that because of the printing, things might be a little off. So don't assume that lining those corners up perfectly, because the way these are printed and get trimmed, it could all come off differently. I'm going to find a point here. We'll use this point of the unit F1L. So I am putting it on that outer border, which we definitely can't leave when we cut. We'll be rolling right over that pin with our rotary cutter. But we're just going to get about 4 pins put in near each corner. We'll stabilize that. We can stabilize it with a stapler. We can stabilize it with our repositionable glue. But I'm just going to put a few pins in there. Do the same thing. Find that matching point. Make sure you're using the same point. Get that nice and lined up. Now we kind of lucked out on these. They were probably all cut and printed at the same time. That's not always the case, so make sure you go through all those layers. Now those 3, we got those 3 corners. I'm going to really brush that out. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to put a pin in each one of my units. And now that I'm stabilizing that in the middle of the unit, I can take those corners out to make sure I don't run over those when I trim those. Keep those pins away from that edge. This one's a little longer, so I'm going to put 2 in there. All right. We have those pinned, so we'll be right back and we'll show you how to cut these apart. Okay, so we have all of our papers, our NP 780s. We have 4 sheets. We have those stacked and pinned. Now we're going to show you how to cut those out. Now, you can use a ruler or you can freehand it. On these, sometimes it's handy to do a ruler because you can get nice and close. In the directions, they do recommend cutting within an inch of sewing booklets. Those sewing booklets, that outer edge is actually going to serve as a guide as you're sewing on placement when we're placing our next fabric piece. If you left a ½ inch on one of those edges, and we see it all the time, you might move that to the wrong directions, too far out, thinking you need to cover that full piece, and then you're going to short yourself somewhere else in the piece. So by getting those nice and close, we're going to make sure that we don't have that issue. Now this is all scrap that we can get rid of. Feel free to use a ruler on those. I do this quite often, so I can get pretty close and do it pretty fast without using a ruler. And now we have all 4 of those together. I'm going to actually take those pins out, and because we spent the time stacking them correctly, we don't have anything cut off. And if you do, that's what tape is good for. It's a great, easy fix, and it won't affect it in the long run. I'm going to take those pins out, and I'm going to put a paper clip in those. Now I'm probably going to be cutting out more F4L units, so I'm going to keep those. I'm going to stack up everything, and even in the directions, the introduction, she says just put everything, all the F, anything that says F on it, put all those in a bag. And then later we're going to go and we're going to get our labeled Ziploc bags and put those into the appropriate bags. So let me show you how I cut a few more of these out, and then we'll move on to that demo of using our Ziploc bags and organizing everything. And it's such an important part of this process is being organized. It will make life so much easier for you, so you truly love this paper piecing process. Take those pins out. Put a paper clip in those. Now, those are sewing foundations. This, like we talked about, this is a template layout sheet, but you're going to cut everything the same way. Here's our template layout sheet. Another paper clip. and stack that up. Okay, I'll finish this and we'll be right back to show you how we use the freezer bags and labeling system to keep everything organized. Okay, we have TP 572 here. We talked earlier about the dashed lines around these 3 T-template units. You want to make sure that you leave these all in one piece, because when we get to that section of stacking and cutting our fabric, we're going to lay this right on top of that 9-inch strip and then cut those out. That's going to make it easier to cut out. It's going to maintain the grain line and keep everything nice and organized. You want to make sure you don't cut those out. You'll make it a lot more difficult on yourself. We also, on this sheet, have a T template. Now the T templates, if you remember, are traditional templates, just like our plexiglass or T templates that you might make or print. That's what these are going to be used. And these are going to be, anytime it says T template, that's going to be our precision cutting. Now, as we organize with our freezer bags, we actually have a freezer bag that says T templates. And anytime we see T template, we're going to put those into that bag. So I'll finish cutting these out and we'll go to our next demonstration. Okay, so I want to talk about, again, go into a little bit more detail about the differences of the different templates and foundation sewing units that we actually sew on, so you can more easily differentiate between those. So we just talked about this unit that is going to be all cut out at the same time. On this we have our T templates. Again, those are going to be cut right on that line, which we'll demo that later, okay, with precision cutting. Now, it is combined with just a regular template, not a precision template. If it's precision, it's always going to be in bold and say T template. This is a template that we're going to cut on that line, but you can see the line inside of it. That's actually, you're going to be trimming this much of it away at a later time. So it doesn't have to be the real precision like we do on the T templates. This is one of our foundation units that we're going to sew on. This looks a little bit different because on this foundation unit, we actually do curved paper piecing, which is a technique that was designed by Judy. And we're going to show that. That's why this is such a great series. You're going to use a foundation, you're going to cut a strip, and we're going to show you how to do that process. We'll be using the diamond cutting ruler to help cut that curve. We'll be talking more about the registration, the TRPs. Those are lines that we're going to sew in at a basting stitch after this unit is built, and that will line up when we're actually constructing the unit. So instead of the little notches that we used to use or marking pens, you'll actually do a basting stitch, line those up when we're constructing the unit, and those line up perfectly. The line from each unit that they line up to line up parallel, so you know exactly where everything needs to be lined up, which before was quite difficult with the curved piecing. It was easy to get that off a little bit and we'd have some fullness or tension. So with those TRPs, they're very important. You'll see how those work as we start constructing the units. So that's a little bit different. This is another T template, which is similar to what we talked about. This T template, again, we're going to be putting that on top of our fabric, right side up. We always have to look at that every once in a while because of the design element or different technique. On occasion, they may have to do wrong side up. So you really have to be aware, read those directions, reference this sheet, and you'll always make sure you're going to be using the right side of the correct side of the fabric. Here's another. This is what most of our foundation units look like. Okay, on the foundation units, we have several different types of lines. Now we've cut this approximately 1/8 of an inch around. As we talked about before, that's really important to get that really close because that outer edge is going to be referenced when we're placing our fabric. We have several different types of lines. We have sewing lines, and you can see where this says line 1. Your sewing lines are the solid lines. Every once in a while people get a little confused because the dashed line looks like a stitch line. It is much bigger than a stitch. That is actually your seam allowance line. So it's simply a reference line as to where your next piece needs to cover. Okay, so you can see this section, this white section versus the cross-hatched section. That seam allowance needs to at least cover to here. Again, that'll be a little more clear when we get into the actual paper piecing techniques. So solid lines are your sew lines, dashed lines are your reference lines. And there's so much information on these sheets. Section 1, template F2L1. When we cut out our template layout sheets, that same number is going to be on this. So we can reference when we're stacking those. There's so much information, and make sure you read through the pattern. It might all not make sense the first time you read that. It might not make sense the second time you read it. But often we have our students read that information, and then when we're in class, because they've done that homework, it all makes sense as we start to go through each step. So really make sure you read that before class. Now here's a pretty traditional template layout sheet. This is the template layout sheet for unit F1L. Okay, template layout sheet number 2. Now what you're going to find with most units, you're going to have 2 different template layout sheets. You're going to have a template layout sheet for the background color, which is the light color here, and that's actually what corresponds here. And you're going to have a second template layout sheet with the crosshatched. I don't have those pulled out, but you'll see that again in a later demonstration. So what you're cutting out here is you're cutting out section 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12 all at one time. Many people ask, why is there so much waste here? If you look at the shape of this, it follows the shape of this unit. What happens with that is if you happen to use a fabric that has a very directional lines, or any kind of graph, any kind of directional pattern, this is essentially fussy cutting every one of those pieces for you. We all know that fussy cutting uses a lot more fabric. These patterns are so busy and so detailed that if you have lines going all different directions, it gets very distracting. So Judy found early on in designing these patterns how important it was to keep that grain line. So that is a big reason for waste. I mean, with paper piecing, you're always going to have some waste because we're applying a bigger piece and then trimming it away. But that also gives you the precision, the time saving, and many advantages to that. A lot of people say they don't like paper piecing because of the waste. I actually found that I save money with paper piecing because I can do a quilt so much faster, and my time is worth more than some scrap. So all good reasons, all good points in paper piecing, and that might answer a few questions as to why we do have a lot of waste. All right, we'll be back with our next demonstration. Okay, so before we go any further in the introduction booklet, I want to talk about how we used Quiltster to set this up and how much help it is in choosing your fabrics. You get to see exactly what it's going to look like, and then the information that you can get from that. So if you look at this picture, Judy designed this in Quiltster. She used the Tula Pink True Colors. So she kept it within the same line, which you don't have to do. You also have the ability in Quiltster to take a picture of any fabric you have in your stash and upload that and use it in any position that you want. So I highly recommend getting on Quiltster and trying that out. Every day they're adding new tutorials to that. Every day they're updating and making the program even better and easier to use. So check that out. There's a couple different purchase options. You can go on and look that up. That's Quiltworx.com. And they're not just using Judy Niemeyer patterns on that anymore. They have several designers whose designs you can use. So we've got our Tula Pink colorway here. And after you design it, you can print not only your picture, but you can also print several different colored charts. So you can print a yardage chart. So here's the Tula Pink yardage chart. The first one they give us just the total yards. So the color Glacier, it tells me that I need 4 5-inch strips and 1 6 3/4 inch strip, and it gives me my 3/4 yard. That does round up a little bit, so it might not be exactly. The next tells you exactly what you need. So once you've filled this out exactly how you want it, this information just prints out for you. Okay? The next print option is you can print that by block. So now, where this says Glacier, you need a total of 3/4 yard. When I do that by block, this says Glacier, I need 1 6 3/4 inch strip, and that is for the J2 block. The next, I need 4 5-inch strips for the L4 block. What that does is I can cut my 3/4 yard, I can cut my 6 3/4 inch strip off, and I can put it in my J2 bag. I can put my 4 5-inch strips in my L4 bag. So all you do is you cut your strip, you put it in the appropriate bag, and when you're done, everything's pretty much prepared for you. There often is some sub-cutting afterwards, but that's all detailed in the instructions. But I can't tell you how much easier our life and our students' lives have become since we've had Quiltster. So it's a great benefit. So I'm going to show you how I've used this. I've printed this out. I like to print out a second copy, which I've done here. And I printed out a copy of both just my total yardage chart, and I'm going to be using, for the demo today, I'm going to be using Topaz. So here's my Topaz. So here's my total yardage. So what I've done is I've come in and cut that. And I've taken my repositional glue stick and I've placed that on that. This is what we're going to do next. This gives me my total yardage. So I can take that or take my information to my quilt shop or onto the Quiltster Marketplace and use that as a guideline on how much I need to purchase. The rest of these strips came off of the yardage by block. So again, here's my topaz. So I'm going to cut the rest of this at the next color. I don't need that yet. And be aware that sometimes, depending on your printer settings or how much detail, you might have a little bit of information on the top from your previous fabric. And we don't need that. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 different yardage cuts that I'm going to need to cut. Now I've cut those apart already. Here they are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have those listed on there. So now I've got all the information I need to do my first round of subcutting. I'm going to take that, and I like to just, I might have to put them over here because I'm limited on room here. I'm going to put those in order. And you're going to see how the first step in cutting, which is strip cutting, and it's all based off of width of fabric, 42 inches width of fabric. Okay. So on our list, told us we needed 3/4 yard, which we have here. So my first set says I need 2 2 3/4 inch strips. Okay, I can put that aside here. I'm going to grab my ruler. I'm going to have to move this over a little bit. So let me verify. 2 2 3/4 inch strips. Getting a little glare there. Where am I at? There we go. 1 2 3/4. There's one. There's 2. I'm going to stack those. I'm going to put that label, and with that repositionable glue stick that stays on there nicely, I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to continue to do that for the rest of these that I've cut individually. My next, it says I need another 2 2 3/4 inch strips. Now the reason they don't have you cut 4 is because these 2 strips went with unit F3B, and these 2 strips go with unit F6B. So those will be bagged and labeled differently. So we're going to continue to cut all of these required strips, and then our next demo will be putting those into the appropriate bags. And actually I have some of those done already. So I'm just going to pull those out and explain how I did that, went through that process. So we've done all of our fabric cutting through Quiltster. And now I'm going to show you how I've organized my freezer bags. So I've gone through and I have all of my J bags and I've got those clipped together. All of my Ks, I've got those clipped together. L, M's, and F's, which we were working on earlier. And I like to keep them in some sort of bucket that's easy to organize. Now, if you keep these all organized like this, especially when you're in class or you're quilting with a friend, it's so easy to bag these up, clip them again, and throw them in your bucket. And next time you get them home or next time you come back to class, they're easy to pull out and simple to pick up right where you left off. If you don't do this bagging system, it really makes it quite difficult to keep everything organized. So by following, it seems confusing, but if you just trust the process and follow each step in the directions step by step, you'll find that it really starts to make sense. And then every pattern that you work on with Quiltworx, we use the same techniques over and over and over again. So trust the process. Don't try to overthink it too far down the road. If you try to figure out why you're doing this, you're going to get more confused. Just follow those directions, do what it says to do, put this in this bag, put this in this bag, and then when you're done with that introduction, it's all ready for you. And then when we start the first booklet, you pull out your bag of J's, and this is what it's going to look like. So we've followed those directions, we've cut those templates, we've cut those fabrics, we've step by step through those directions, and it will always tell you place unit J1 in bag J1. Now don't assume, because sometimes there's some subcutting later on, so you really want to read those directions as to where it says now put this in this corresponding bag. Okay, so if I pull out my J1 bag, I have all of the foundation units that I'm going to use. I've got my templates that I'm going to use, template layout sheets that I use, and I have my fabrics that I'll be using. So when we go to do that J1 unit, all we have to do is pull out this bag. We have everything organized for us. We don't have to dig through 30 other bags or even 3 other bags. And I've labeled, and I printed these out on my printer, but you can just write this on your freezer bag. I like to reuse my freezer bags, so I do like to do the labels, but you can do that any way you want as long as you label those clearly. Same thing with J2. I've got all of my foundation units, all of my templates, all of my template layout sheets, and my fabrics. So there's no guessing at this point as to what I need to do. Like I said, I've done this for my Ks. There's my K1 bag, my K2, my K3, my K4. Now, once in a while, you'll find that there's only one fabric in some of these. And as you go through the directions, you may be subcutting, and you may be cutting, for example, in this J1 bag, this template layout sheet, you actually are cutting for several different units, but it will tell you through the directions what bag it will go into in that second round of subcutting. So again, just follow those directions step by step. Don't try to overthink it. And when you're finished with all of that, it's going to make your life a lot easier and make building this quilt much more fun.
So the next thing I want to talk about is that in every introduction booklet for the Stella Maris Mixer series, there are T-template pages included. If you are working on the pattern that has already been designed and turned into a pattern, then these templates will only be included if they're needed to complete the project shown on the cover sheet. However, in each of the mixer cases, the introduction booklets include these blank T-templates. This is not always something that you're going to find in our mixer introduction booklets. Sometimes it doesn't make sense, but we have included them here and in other cases because there are many times when you may not want to paper piece one of the start points one of the star points, or backgrounds in many of the quilts you could design and make. And in Quiltster, there are block options that will let you choose without any paper piecing in them. And the yardage will match the yardage that you'll need to cut just with the T-templates, not for paper piecing. Sometimes you will use these templates and other times you won't. They are there for when you use Quiltster and choose to use a block group that doesn't have paper piecing in it. In this case, you're going to follow cutting instructions that are included in the introduction booklets. And there you can, this is just an example of one of the pages where you can see that it shows you your strips and how to lay the T-templates on your strips. And then it also gives you a yardage table so you can calculate your yardage. For the 45-inch square, 57-inch square, and 68-inch square sizes, blank templates are included for the B, E, and F background or border packages as well. While including these papers does increase the cost of the introduction booklet a little bit, if you plan to make several versions of the Stella Maris Mixer, this is an incredible value as these T-templates can be reused over and over again as you create many versions of your mixer quilt. To reuse them, simply place them back in the introduction booklet instructions and design with them in the future. If you're using repositionable glue, you may want to place a barrier between the T-templates so that they come apart more easily the next time you use them without tearing. To use these T-templates, you're going to cut right on those solid lines, then place them on your fabric strips facing right side up, just as shown in the graphics here. And then you're going to cut the fabric to the same size as the T-templates. Make sure that you're marking any of your transition and registration point lines. And if you don't know what those are, please tune in to some of our videos and that will become obvious to you very quickly as we talk a lot about them, especially when it comes to assembly of your quilts. To demonstrate the value of these T-templates and reusing them, I've created several layouts here that show you ways you can use these T-templates. In this first example, I've used a queen quilt 3-round with C border queen mixer, and you would have to purchase an introduction booklet, then the K group, B group, C group, and D group. So just to show you this, I have a queen introduction booklet, which you need for the whole quilt. Then I have a block here in the K group. I don't have one in the J. I don't have one in the L. Then I have a block in the B group. I have one in the C group, and I have one in the D group. This would total $97.50 for all of the pieces of that pattern. However, if I wanted to then make one that's smaller, I could do a variety of different things. That queen booklet is going to have all of the templates, all the blank templates that I need in it to make any of these star points blank and also that background border. So I'm just going to not purchase another introduction booklet for this size because the queen booklet also includes all of the assembly information for a quilt that's this size. You just don't add the borders to it. And then I'm going to make a J group booklet and a K group, or I'm going to purchase, I guess, a J group booklet and a K group booklet for this version. I don't have to purchase an L and I don't have to purchase a B. The total for that's only actually $12 because I have everything else I need already in the introduction booklet. Here's just one more example. This has a blank J and a blank B, so this is a blank section and this is a blank section, and I've put a paper piece unit into the K group and one into the L. Again, each of those booklets are $6 each for a total of $12, so you can see once you've purchased that introduction booklet, especially for that queen size, you can do a wide range of quilt projects without having to purchase the introduction again, and do them very affordably. So in this final slide, I just want to point out here that mixers are truly a flexible and amazing concept. If you purchase the introduction booklets, then you use Quiltster to mix and match the blocks for all the different sizes and samples, and you purchase only what you need for your unique design, you're going to have endless options. In the case of the Stella Maris Mixers, there's 6 different layout sizes, which I've outlined here at the top. So you can make a quilt in any of these different sizes using these block groups. Then, under each of those layouts, I've included the block groups that you might encounter and how many options there are for each of those groups. You simply multiply those numbers together to come up with the possible combinations of blocks and different types of quilts you can create. And you can see as you move across this table, there's over 51,624 different Stella Maris mixer combinations that you could make. Once you learn how to use mixers from Quiltworx, you will find that you have a huge resource of customizable products and a way to make things uniquely your own. The other thing I love about the Stella Maris Mixer series is that all of the videos for this will be published and available for free on our YouTube channel. That will not be the case for all of our patterns or projects in the future, but it is for the Stella Maris Mixer series, so there's no time better than the present to learn how to use mixers. Now we're going to go back to Tammy, and Tammy is going to walk us through the last little section of information that you need to know to set up your quilt.
Now we're not using any blank templates in this layout, so we're going to skip to page 10 where it says complete the piecing in each booklet. That's where we're going to start with our J's. We're going to grab our J's and begin with directions there. Now once we complete all of those J, K, L, M, and F pieces, we will come back to this quilt assembly. Now the quilt assembly is at the end of the introduction booklet, and whether you're using blank templates or whether you've pieced it, it all goes together the same. So this graphic here shows you each step of how that gradually gets put together. Now that seems very tiny. In your newsprint sheets, you actually have a full newsprint piece that will show you all of this step by step of this description here. So when we get done with all of our piecing, we're going to hang this up on our design wall. We'll be able to look at how we're going to start completing that to finish putting our quilt together.